Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, and I'm really glad to have you here. We're in a great mood today. We're going to do a lot on today's show. Now, eventually, we're going to have to get to the topic at hand, which is everything still okay for Georgia's 2021 recruiting class? As expected, Tony Grimes chose North Carolina yesterday. As thought to be, maybe Dallas Turner going to give some bad news later on today there as well. What does all this mean? Is Georgia still on track to put an elite class together? Luckily for us, because Friday's a holiday, we have Jeff Sintel on the show coming up today to answer a lot of those questions. We'll get into all of that, where Georgia goes post Tony Grimes. We will touch on the Dallas Turner thing. We'll cover a lot of ground here coming up with Jeff Sintel on that topic. I'm also going to begin today something recruiting related as well, which I just think is sort of fun. We'll do some of that off the top of the program today. It is going to be a very busy show. I'm very glad to have you with us. And in fact, let's go ahead and do it. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I feel like I have my finger on the pulse of the audience, at least as well as one possibly can. Here's what I feel like everybody wants to talk about today, and we're going to talk about it. Is everything still okay with Georgia's 2021 class? You know, if you pay very close attention to the news and you listen to some of the rumblings, as I like to call it, the online chatter, it's not exactly great news right now. Georgia did not get five-star cornerback Tony Grimes. We'll touch on that here coming up. The month of June came and went without five-star linebacker Smile Mondon making any kind of commitment. You've had this weird thing where Miami has seemingly emerged as a player for the five-star safety James Williams. Dallas Turner's making his announcement today. I don't think anybody thinks it's going to be Georgia. Turner himself, in explicit terms, has stated that he has kind of viewed Alabama as his leader, going back to the story that Jeff Sintel wrote not too long ago at DawgNation.com. So is everything still okay on the 2021 class front? I obviously told you last week that I would remind you of all the years in which we've kind of done this type of thing in the summer. And yes, everything ended up being fine. Georgia had like the number one class. Is that still true for 2021? We'll at least pay some respect and some attention to that topic on today's show. In fact, it's a Wednesday. That's not normally a Jeff Sintel day, but because Friday is a holiday, first and foremost, but also because this kind of feels like one of those days where it's worth Jeff making an emergency visit to the show, we'll do a lot of that with Jeff Sintel here coming up. If you don't mind, though, let me begin with something I think is just kind of fun, because one of the recruits that's emerged as, I think, about as popular as anybody with the Georgia 2021 class is Lavassier Carroll. Now, admittedly around here, because we are Gator haters first and foremost, part of the reason why we like Carroll is we think Carroll did some pretty A-plus trolling of Florida recently when he kind of said he was flirting with flipping to Florida only to stay at Georgia because that was the best for him. That Florida may have been a place where he could have gotten some early playing time, but ultimately Georgia was the right place for him to be. Honestly, for recruits who do that, and we kind of thought Warren Brinson did something similar a year ago, Carson Beck kind of done something similar to that in the past. Recruits like that will always go on the top shelf of our mind, because if you're willing to troll Florida on your way to choosing Georgia, well, you sort of had us at hello when it comes to stuff like that. However, there's something else that's kind of interesting, I think, fun about Lavassier Carroll. He's also kind of turning out to be maybe a pretty good recruiter for UGA there as well. Let me show you this image from social media of he and Xavier Sori, very impressive linebacker, who, by the way, just announced his plans to attend IMG. So you see the big graphic from Georgia that says IMG to UGA with Xavier Sori and Lavassier Carroll there. Sori liked that on Twitter and tagged Lavassier Carroll. They're obviously having a good time with that. And if you're a Georgia fan, they'd like to see Sori as a part of the 2021 class. The fact that he and Carroll are seemingly fast friends here, and the fact that Lavassier loves Georgia apparently. Georgia's had success at IMG before. It has every right to kind of tout itself as an IMG to UGA pipeline just based on some of the other IMG guys who have been at Georgia. All of that seems really good, and it would seem to be at least possibly working out according to plan. However, there is something else about that graphic that kind of jumped out to me that I thought was very interesting. Now, if you're watching radio podcast, I'm going to have to describe this to you. Look, can we zoom in on the top part of that? Yeah, so if you look at the very top of this image, and I'll put a link to this when I post the show at DawgNation.com later on. You can see this for yourself. So what you see, I don't think it can be described any other way, are these personal logos for both Xavier Sori, Lavassier Carroll. It reminds you of if you watch like WWE or something like that. These are like personal logos, and they're both really cool. Lavoisier Carroll's kind of got a nice LC thing going on. The Xavier Sorey thing is really pretty cool all the way around. It's like some scissors for the X in his name with the S right there. These are very clever, very well done, and it would seem to be an example to me of Georgia moving in the direction of what would seem to be the modern trend in recruiting, which is acknowledging that, the topic of name and image and likeness, or if you want to describe it this way, players building their personal brands. It would seem to be that Georgia is fully embracing that and making that a part of its recruiting pitch. Now, I think this is probably smart because, as I said before, it would certainly seem to be that this is the direction that all of college football is going in. And if you're going to be a program like Georgia that thinks of itself as leading the way in recruiting, this is one of those ways in which you kind of have to lead the way on this. It's also probably, to be completely honest, an example of Kirby Smart saying one thing while privately doing something maybe a little bit different. When Smart was asked about this, going back last October, one of the clips that kind of jumps out to me was a little bit of, hey, I'm not quite so sure what this is, and we just want to make sure it's all going to be fair, whatever else, not necessarily fully embracing the idea of it when speaking publicly. In fact, let me let you go back the week of the Florida game when Smart was kind of asked about this. Not exactly the most enthusiasm in his voice when he talked about it then. Here's Kirby Smart.
It looks like to me that they would come up with a proposal somewhere around January 2021 maybe, and that still seems like a long way off in my mind. But we'll have to prepare, and whatever they decide to go with, we'll deal with it. But I don't have enough information to form a complete opinion on it to understand it completely. Our biggest concern as coaches across the country is it going to be an even playing field? The biggest concern was state to state, it not being balanced. And if it comes out balanced state to state, then we're all playing on the same playing field.
So this is where, if you're a UGA fan, I think you got to love Kirby Smart, because he says, hey, man, listen, the biggest concern for me is this going to be balanced? Is this going to be fair for everybody? Is this going to be even across the board? Now, deep down, me as podcast, radio, streaming video host, whatever your walk of life is, we all know that's not Kirby Smart's concern. Kirby Smart doesn't want this to be even and fair for everybody. He wants his unfair share of the elite recruits. And we all know that. Now, you can't necessarily say that when posed a question by the media, but deep down, we kind of know that's true. That Smart may say, hey, listen, coaches, our biggest concern is this going to be instituted fairly so it's even across the board? Deep down, Kirby Smart is working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that if name, image, and likeness is going to be a part of college football in some form or fashion, players profiting and, off their, personal brand would seem to be the direction a lot of this is moving. Kirby Smart, I think, privately is saying, how can we make sure that Georgia, with its geographic connection to a giant metropolis like Atlanta, with its presence on national TV on a week-in, week-out basis, with just the kind of robust fan base that, is always scarfing up all the apparel and things like that. Georgia always ranks very high on, dollars spent by fans on the team. How do we make sure that our program is in a position to allow players to feel like that if those personal logos matter to them, if profiting off name, image, and likeness, growing your social media following, if all that kind of stuff matters, I think privately what Kirby Smart is probably saying is, how do we make sure that Georgia is in the best position to do that? He'd be a fool not to, and obviously Kirby Smart is no fool. I have it on pretty good word that this is a part of the recruiting pitches that Georgia's making to certain players. This social media would seem to be evidence of that point being true. So just kind of a fun way to kick things off here today, that college football would seem to be changing. Now, we'll wait and find out if it's changed for the better or not. Mileage may vary in terms of opinions on all of that, but it is changing seemingly one way or another, that players profiting off endorsements, getting a chance to make money in addition to the regular agreement that's been long-standing in college football, that is the new era of the sport. And smart coaches, successful programs are going to want to navigate that and put themselves in a position to succeed. And certainly it would be no surprise to find out that Georgia is seemingly leading the way in all of that. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook and YouTube, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are really glad to have you on the show today. We'll have Jeff Sintel, special Wednesday appearance from Jeff here coming up in just a couple of minutes. A lot of recruiting stuff to get to. I'll preview some of the Tony Grimes stuff with Jeff here in a couple of minutes on the show there as well. Let me, though, take care of a couple of pieces of business before we get to that. Let me start with this. Today is a Wednesday. As we head towards Friday, just know this, that Friday we will be observing the Independence Day holiday, so there will be no video podcast version of DawgNation Daily this upcoming Friday. Monday is also a little bit of a scheduling thing for us, so we're going to do something we've never done before. We are going to have an edition of DawgNation Daily. Now, we've done podcast-only pre-recorded before. The Monday edition of DawgNation Daily coming up will be a pre-recorded podcast video thing. So if you tune in to watch at 10 a.m., you will still be able to tune in and watch on Monday. We just won't be live, and I'll make that very clear. One thing we don't do around here is pull wool over people's eyes. If something's pre-recorded, I tell you it's pre-recorded. I'm not trying to trick you into thinking that it's live if it's not. So we'll be very clear on Monday. It will be a pre-recorded show. We've done this for podcasts before because podcasts are always pre-recorded. We've not done this for video, but coming up on Monday, we will have a pre-recorded show. Friday, we will be off in observance of the Independence Day holiday, and hope a lot of you are getting ready to celebrate and enjoy a good weekend to the extent that you can in this socially distant world in which we live. Hopefully you got some fun coming up. Now, speaking of fun, I had some fun yesterday, and I want to shout out my friends at Kroger here for a moment. First of all, speaking of Jeff Sintel, tonight, 6 p.m., on the DawgNation video channels, you've got Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That's always really fun. And, of course, it would not be made possible, as I say, without our friends at Kroger. They're getting you ready for this upcoming 4th of July weekend, too. Star-spangled savings this 4th of July weekend. It's brats, it's the boneless pork half loin, beer and wine, plus 10% off all TNT fireworks. So check that out at your local Kroger. You can kind of get in there and enjoy some of that. Also, yesterday, we kind of did something around here at DawgNation that just really kind of felt like old times. You know, we have not been able to connect with our audience as much during the coronavirus lockdown just because we're trying to keep everybody safe, trying to keep ourselves safe, and trying to, set a good example. But you may remember that we did our Kroger Father's Day giveaway of the gift card and the grill not too long ago. Bud Hennenball was our winner on that. We got a chance to stop by and visit with Bud and his family yesterday, give the grill away. There you see, if you're watching on video, very nice grill courtesy of our friends at Kroger. Bud holding up the Kroger gift card there as well. Bud's a great guy. He's a wrestling coach, very plugged into the world of wrestling, just a super, super guy. And honestly, for me to be out and about, now we're 6 feet apart, we got masks on, we're all being safe and everything else, but to be able to connect with a DawgNation Daily listener and viewer again yesterday, that just felt really good. And honestly, it's stuff like this I feel like that DawgNation does really well. Giveaways and contests and get-togethers, and we just believe in having fun when all possible. There's just too much seriousness in the world. We want to be the less serious part of your world. And so to be able to go in yesterday and give away a gift card and give away a grill to Bud and his family, that was an awesome thing to be able to do. So huge thanks to Kroger for making all that possible, and congratulations to Bud for being our big winner, Bud Hennenball there. All right, before we get Jeff Sintel, Tony Grimes, the 5-star cornerback, did choose North Carolina yesterday. This was not unexpected news. He did this via a commitment video that was shared, and I guess the question, and we'll let Jeff Sintel talk a lot about this coming up in a moment, but I guess the question ends up being, where does Georgia go from here? I think the one thing that you got to say is that it's hard to really point to any area in which Georgia poorly recruited Grimes. No area seemingly in which Georgia came up short in this recruitment. I think that Georgia was probably hurt by the inability to host Grimes on visits. There's obviously been an NCAA lockdown on that. That's not me excuse making. That's just me stating the facts as I understand them. When you hear Grimes in his own words, he's talked to Jeff Sintel before about this. I mean, certainly Grimes said everything you would ever want a recruit to say about his would-be position coach, Charlton Warren, head coach Kirby Smart, very involved in the defensive backs. When you hear Grimes in his own word, hard to find fault with the way that Warren and Smart went about this. In fact, let's go back in the past and hear Tony Grimes on that very topic.
It was different when I talked to Coach Warren and Coach Kirby Smart. Them two right there, those are the greatest in the game right now. Coach Warren and Coach Kirby Smart. Like, that's the one main thing that, like, when I think of Georgia, is Coach Kirby Smart and Coach Warren. Two of the best DBs in the college game right now.
So when he says two of the best DBs in the college game right now, what he means is the best defensive backs coaches in the game. And we all know that the relationship that Grimes has with Dre Blythe, the great former Carolina defensive back, now defensive backs coach, who kind of comes from that Hampton Roads area in Virginia. We know that was a strong bond. They seemingly almost had what almost felt like a familial connection, I guess you would almost say. But when you hear him talk about Smart and Warren, hard to say that the bond between Smart, Warren, and Grimes wasn't itself, very strong there as well. So I don't think you necessarily find fault on that. North Carolina is growing itself up in terms of a talent acquisition. This is becoming quite a player on the recruiting trail, and Grimes would seemingly be the latest example of that. However, the overall talent profile between the two programs at defensive back, what Georgia has, what North Carolina has, would seem to be just a little bit different. And when Grimes has spoken to Jeff Sintel before, he's also kind of talked about how he viewed the talent situation there at Georgia. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit more from Grimes on that topic.
They're doing real good. They're trying to build that thing to be a DBU. They're trying to make that secondary unbelievable. And I love that they're doing that. I mean, honestly, the DBs win games. To me, DBs win games.
So listen, I mean, what do you do with all of this? I mean, Grimes, first of all, comes across as a super sharp, well-spoken dude. That's a guy, speaking as a fan here for a moment, that I would have loved to have had at Georgia. And maybe, the door is still open. We'll find out more from Jeff Sintel on that. We'll also find out about some of those names that Georgia will now prioritize because Grimes is off the board here. But there are moments in life or in college football, when you take an L in recruiting and you can't really look at any of the way in which you went about this and said, if we had to do it all over again, I don't really know what Georgia would have, done differently. Made a strong pitch, sold itself, as Grimes said in his own words, a future DBU type school. Charlton Warren quickly growing in his reputation as a defensive backs coach. Kirby Smart probably already there in that regard. Grimes just chose another school. Is it over? We'll find out. Who's next? We'll find out there as well. A lot to talk about in recruiting when it comes to a special Wednesday. We'll call it emergency appearance for Jeff Sintel right here on DawgNation Daily. And we'll get Jeff here coming up in just a minute on that. We'll let him get squared away, and then he will be ready to go. And so we'll talk about Dallas Turner, the announcement that he's going to make coming up. We'll talk about a lot of those things, and it'll all lead to the question of, okay, so is everything still okay? Is Georgia still on track for an elite class? Just given some of those big-time names that you think, might be trending elsewhere, might be going other places. So we'll do a lot of that with Jeff Sintel coming up in just a moment. It looks like we also have a little bit of time to get ready for Jeff. So why don't we take a couple of your comments while we're waiting on that. I'll pop over to Facebook here for a moment, and when Jeff is ready to go, we'll be rocking and rolling with that with you here on a Wednesday. And hope all of you are having a great day and getting ready for a 4th of July weekend. I wanted to make sure I kind of gave the schedule a little bit, start kind of planning for that a little bit, because one of the things I'm hearing from a little bit is we don't have any control who gets a Facebook notification, who doesn't. That's not something we're able to control in that regard. So some of you have been kind of curious of, well, is Jeff ready to go? Let me just finish my point, and we'll bring Jeff into the conversation here. Some of you said, hey, are you guys here because I didn't get a Facebook notification? You should always assume, unless I tell you differently, that we're going to be here. Since the coronavirus lockdown began, we've only taken one day off. We got some vacation coming up at some point in time in July, and as I said before, we won't be here on Friday. But other than that, you should know that that we're going to be here probably. So keep that in mind. Now, as promised, I want to get some of that recruiting stuff with Jeff Sintel. We'll get ready to do that. And as I said before, it's good to have all of you with us here today on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, a lot to do with Jeff Sintel here on this Wednesday. He's good enough to be with us today on DawgNation Daily, just given the fact that we're post Tony Grimes, looking ahead to a Dallas Turner decision today that also most Georgia fans don't feel like it's going to go the way of the good guys. So, Jeff, let me just make this open-ended to begin with. What I said before you joined us is I'm obviously disappointed that Tony Grimes did not choose Georgia, did not necessarily expect him to, but it's still disappointing nonetheless. However, I played the audio of things that Grimes told you in the past. Good relationship with Charlton Warren, great relationship with Kirby Smart, respectful of the defensive back success that Georgia has had, barring having a guy on campus more for visits, which has been prohibited because of the coronavirus. I'm not quite so sure how Georgia could have done this recruitment any differently to get a different result than ultimately how it worked out.
Well, they could have had Brandon Adams speaking to the university that the coronavirus would be gone, a la George Pickens, and then maybe they'd have gotten him on campus a lot more, man.
Maybe so.
I think so. And I think we've written this a bunch of times, but I think the thing here is you got to remember, I will just look at the Tony Grimes decision as kind of like an unfinished recruiting project. Like that project that our wives always want us to get done, and sometimes we go sneak off and play golf, or we used to go to ball games or whatever. But here's how things began with Tony Grimes. There was like a year where he thought he didn't have an offer from Georgia, when maybe he actually did, but regardless, Georgia's offer came later than other schools. And when Georgia finally did, I remember him telling me at Future 50, he's like, man, Georgia's got to have a great visit. Georgia's got to have a great visit coming up in January, or I don't think they'll make my top 8. I don't think they're barely right around my top 12. This is going to be a, move or lose kind of visit for Georgia in January. And as we know, the visit went gangbusters. Georgia immediately secured an official visit, and Georgia was set to get an official visit early June. They were going to get a visit in March. They were going to get another visit in April. And that was the chance for Georgia to kind of basically blossom into the best possible recruiting destination in his mind. I mean, Tony Grimes is a heck of a prospect, but he made comments yesterday when he was announcing his decision that the atmosphere from the Virginia-North Carolina game a year ago really moved him. And I'm just going to let that breathe out into the world and just make a simple point that I feel confident that there are a lot more atmospheres in the SEC that are greater than a Virginia-North Carolina game in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But it is what it is. He's happy with his decision, and I think as we wrote on DawgNation this morning, where we kind of looked at, who's next at cornerback for Georgia and what does the board look like after Grimes, because now, it's amazing how things can change. It certainly appears, Brandon, that Tony is going to take that course this summer, graduate early, and then report and become a part of the North Carolina football team for this fall. That now certainly sounds like it is the most likely path for Tony Grimes. And if that happens, then there's no way that a school like Georgia, which was supposedly going to get one of those official visits after the decision, there's no way that Georgia can even get back in this race now, should that happen.
Is there any chance that doesn't happen? Or, I mean, whether it be, academically, it's just not possible to get it done that fast, or he would reconsider, Georgia convinces him to reconsider reclassifying. I mean, is that a closed door now? Is there any chance the reclassification doesn't happen?
Yeah, Brendan, the best thing I could say there is just things don't work the way they used to. Like, we can't say for certain. We've got to say things like, that's the plan or that's the intention. That doesn't mean it's 100% certain or it's what's going to happen. I know people want that closure, but here's what it is. If it's only going to take him about a month at that of online courses to get that class, graduate early, and then go show up in August, mid-August, wherever, at North Carolina now. So it's not going to take a whole lot of things there. And there's the inclination that will there or will there not be high school football in Virginia this fall? Will it be a reduced schedule? Will there be a postponement? Those are things no one can definitely put their finger on, yes or no, in any sort of direction right there. So all I can say, and I'm going to be very careful to use these terms, is it certainly seems like Grimes now intends to take that class, take that summer class, graduate early, and be a North Carolina Tar Heel this fall. That's the way things look as of today. We got information last week, even after he made his commitment announcement that was set for June the 30th, yesterday on Father's Day. We learned that he was going to take some official visits after his decision. Shortly before that, we learned that the plan was now to stay in high school and stay a 2020 recruit. So a lot of this has been up and down and changed a lot for Tony Grimes over the last 3 weeks.
So do this for me then. I know you wrote about this at DawgNation.com, and people should read the story for themselves, but give me some of those next names. I know a Nugget Warren comes up here. I know that, well, I'll just let you give me the names of who should fans be prioritizing in their mind if indeed Tony Grimes is gone for good.
Yeah, so there's a few names that really jump out to me, and you got to look at Georgia. First of all, what Georgia always wants to do is to sign a bunch of highly adaptable players, either guys that can play safety or star, or guys that can play a pure corner out on a press corner or a boundary corner out on an island, and then maybe play the nickel or then maybe play the star. It certainly looks like to me that Georgia's going to get two guys that can primarily play corner in this cycle, two guys that can primarily play safety in this cycle, and maybe a guy that can flip back and forth between, the nickel corner or the safety, what have you, kind of like what Tyreek Stevenson does now for Georgia, or what Mark Webb does for Georgia as well. I think the names that readily come to mind is Dejon Nugget Warren. Remember, he's not going to make his decision until December the 14th. He's going to visit Georgia with that last official. Those are still the plans right now. We have to be very tenuous when talking about officials and when they might happen, because some of those in September might get pushed back as well. But Nugget Warren is a guy, man, he walked on to his junior college and is now one of the nation's, I think he's the nation's number 2 overall JUCO recruit, the number 1 overall corner. He looks at Georgia. He's feeling a certain type of way about Georgia. He loves what they did with DJ Daniel as a fellow highly rated JUCO cornerback that ended up starting, I believe, 11 or 12 games for Georgia last fall. Nugget likes what Georgia's doing. It's got a top-level defense. Nugget is a guy who's had an interesting path. He will turn 21 in December, and if he would have had his grades in fine shape as a high school recruit, he would have came out with Jake Fromm and Andrew Thomas and Richard LeCount in that class. So he's had a different walk to get to this point in college football. The other name is Nyland Green. That's a guy out of Newton High School. At some point, everybody's crystal ball chatter had pointed him towards Clemson. Now you hear a lot about Auburn. Georgia always has remained in that top 3 right now. Another name that I want to throw in there that I kind of think is a little more likely than Nyland Green, that's Isaiah Johnson out of West Virginia. Isaiah Johnson is the nation's number 7 corner. Green is the nation's number 8 corner among the high school crop. Johnson is interesting because he's an Atlanta native who actually visited Georgia with Tony Grimes back in January, and it was an impactful visit for both young men. It was basically the last remaining visit that either of those 2 young men took, especially in Johnson's case. We said he's from Atlanta. Brennan, he was also one of those guys that was so skilled and so talented enough that he was at the opening as a junior before his junior season. Those are kind of the 3 names that you throw out. I'll just be frank. If Georgia doesn't get one of those 3 names, then it will be very tough to offset the loss of Grimes if they don't end up with a guy like a Nugget Warren or a guy like a Nyland Green or a guy like an Isaiah Johnson. The next best hope for Georgia in the post-Grimes decision world would have to be one of those 3 names. Now, there's another guy, Demarius McGee. He's out of Pensacola Catholic in Florida. That's the name. You've got the name Javon Bullard, who picked up an offer in state from Georgia as well. There's a young man in Arkansas. There's a young man in Virginia. Both of those guys have Georgia in their top 5, but that's more of a 3-star recruit, maybe that late bloomer guy that needs to have a lot of great senior film. I will throw in one name because it's a long discussion of about really 8 names. When you're looking just at kind of pure cornerbacks, I think it would be 7 or 8 names. But there's a young man named Nathaniel Wiggins who was at Grady High in Atlanta last year. He's now at Westlake High in Atlanta this year. And this is purely somebody in state that I just look at it and go, wow, that's somebody that's definitely the type of cornerback that can play in the SEC, that could excel at a place like Georgia. Georgia offered him. He was in his top 8, but Georgia probably hasn't prioritized him like other schools like Oregon and USC has. Wiggins looks like he's going to leave the state. Be interesting in the post-Grimes world what maybe Georgia could do to try and get back in things there with Nathaniel Wiggins as well. But those 3 names that we mentioned earlier are probably the priorities to consider going forward.
All right, let me move on, talk about a few other names here. Dallas Turner set to make his decision today. Most people seem to think it's going to be Alabama. Turner himself told you Alabama was his leader, going back a while ago. I have said on this show a lot that I think that the inability to host visitors may have hurt Georgia with Turner as much as it's hurt them with any recruit, because, his affection for Alabama is the kind of thing I think that can be upended if you get a chance to show off what, UGA feels like when you're in Athens and on campus. Is the door going to be remained open for Turner beyond today if he does what most people expect him to do, which is choose Alabama?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting for Turner. Turner was a guy, he visited 2 schools in January. It was Georgia and then Alabama. And Georgia was basically a feel-good school. He liked everything. He liked the priority. But then he But just every time he measured Georgia against Alabama, Alabama just had an edge, whether it's NFL guys, whether it's championships, whether it's pipeline to the NFL, whether it's getting it done, getting the wins in the big games. He just liked Alabama just a smidge better in all those cases. And I think with Turner, you're right to point out that I think if he would have taken more visits to Georgia by now, he certainly would have. If he could have, and he would have brought the family along, that would have given him more data to think about, okay, I like Georgia's next 3 or 4 years perhaps better than Alabama's next 3 or 4 years, but he hasn't had the ability to do that. And I think in a vacuum, he's actually told me that the things he needed to figure out with his specific decision and his specific recruiting walk, he was able to do so over Zooms and text messages and phone calls and, online conferencing. He's found what he needs to know right now to kind of get it over with and move forward. And he has yet to come out with a decision. I know you were looking for some finality about what's going to happen with Grimes. Is it certain? Is it not certain? It'll be very interesting to see if Turner continues to take visits after he makes his commitment today to what I feel is certainly going to be either Georgia or Alabama. Those are going to be the two teams that he has looked at for the longest. And as you said, it certainly seems to me like Alabama still holds that edge over the Bulldogs at this time.
June came and went. Smile Mondon never made his decision. You hear chatter about, Tennessee maybe still being a player, Auburn trying to get involved here. Is something going on with Georgia and Mondon? And is it in particular bad news for UGA that Mondon didn't make any kind of June announcement?
No, I don't think it's bad news. I just think it was always like, Brandon, like we said, this is a culture right now, or I think so, or it sounds like, or the plan is currently to do that. But when kind of, what is the phrase, when the rubber meets the road, or it's time to go and move forward with a decision, everyone's just not ready for that. I think he's getting a lot of pressure and interest, especially from Auburn and then Tennessee and Georgia. I still think Smile Mondon is a guy that, has a lot of talent, and he's a guy with Georgia fans start looking and wondering and scratching their heads if there's no Barrett Carter in the 2021 class. There's a lot more pressure now on Smile Mondon to be that guy in the 2021 class at inside linebacker as well. Him not making a decision is something that did not come as a surprise to us. We were told maybe 10 days ago not to look for him to make that decision in June, that nothing was kind of coming together. There is an air to his decision where he kind of now, it's kind of funny how recruits are kind of hot and cold, where, they put out videos that kind of tease at something, but at the same time, they want it to be ambivalent, and kind of have the eventual decision be a lot of a surprise for folks out there. And I think that certainly, to me, feels like what Smile Mondon's doing right now.
Okay, so the other day I kind of joked on the program about, in the past, what Georgia coaches, according to your own words, by the way, have said about the panic from some fans about recruiting not going very well, that Georgia coaches have kind of laughed about that kind of stuff in the past. And so, on DawgNation Daily, we, as much as anybody else, should understand the backstory in all of this, that there have been summers when it seemed like things weren't going great for Georgia recruiting, but by the time the class came together, it was tops in the country or whatever else. And yet, you still have a situation today where Grimes just chose North Carolina. Turner's going to probably choose Alabama. Miami has seemingly emerged as kind of a weird potential player for James Williams. Whatever's going on with Smile Mondon, that's more uncertain now than it seemed to be at one point in time. Is there a legitimate concern about the 2021 class and the elite nature of that class on the basis of some of the storylines that I just chronicled?
I think it's the difference in a lot of folks' mind where, on the forum, Brandon, a lot of our board participants bring up that they've been spoiled by Kirby Smart in this class and its recruiting, momentum year upon year upon year. And it was kind of weird watching the Tony Grimes stuff yesterday, and just seeing that, Georgia was that feeling that Georgia fans have for a big 5-star deciding to join the fold. Another school experienced that, and Georgia was merely a hat on the table. And you combine that with Dallas Turner now, and along with the general sense of everybody's waiting for these games. They miss spring practice. They're waiting for kind of college football to rev its engines back up again. I think it's just kind of all mushrooming on folks, Brandon. And I think when it for a lot of the fan base and their thoughts and feelings right now, I just kind of try to place this in the proper perspective. Elite for Georgia, a great recruiting class for Georgia, now is that either number one or number two. And if it's number two, then it includes a whole bunch of 5 stars and a whole bunch of 3-star Kirby Smart specials that are going to end up looking like a Jordan Davis or an Eric Stokes, Azeez Ojulari, those mid-range 4 stars that play like 5 stars. That's acceptable if you're a top 2 class. If visits don't return, Brandon, it just removes. And if visits don't return for any time soon, if a recruit has a certain thing in their mind that, okay, they're set on this school, and it's allowed to marinate, kind of stay with them for months upon months, they kind of convince themselves that that's the direction they should go instead of opening up their process and looking around. I think should visits return maybe October, November, December, so that sort of thing happens. It'll be a limited environment. You wonder about how many recruits Georgia could even put in Sanford Stadium, if at all, for a game at whether it's 40, 50, 60% capacity. Those are things that are definitely not fleshed out, and what the world doesn't really know what that's going to look like as of yet. I just feel like the way this staff recruits, if they get the ability to get on the field, the recruiting field and the recruiting trail, they're just so good at it, Brandon. They just need the chance to get back and do what they do best in order to distinguish themselves from other schools. Because right now, Brandon, when no one's visiting, there's not a chance for a Georgia to sit there and the recruits to compare what things were like at Chapel Hill or things were like at other schools and compare that to Georgia and get the notion and breathe the air and to see all the reasons why for a lot of kids over the last 4 or 5 years, there's just been something different and special about Georgia. They just don't get the chance to see that right now.
Let me finish on a positive note. Elite 11 quarterback camp going on this week in Nashville. It's been hard for me to follow exactly everything that's going on there, but the best I can tell based on some of the social media stuff that I'm seeing, it seems like Brock Vandegrift has done pretty well so far. I know the bigger tests for him are still to come, but I guess pretty good reviews for Vandegrift amongst the rest of the top quarterbacks in the country thus far.
Yeah, he's going to hold his own, and I would imagine by anyone's measure or standard when all these rankings do come out. I think 24/7 ranks players now. Rivals will rank players now. Also, what's going to happen are the official Elite 11 rankings are going to come out as well for after this and those are the ones that everyone pays attention to. The last day is actually today, Brandon. The pro day was really a big part of their score. That took place late last night. Actually, Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord got a 45 for his pro day, which is one of the better pro days of the last 4 or 5 years, as I can recall. I think Brock's number was a 32. That didn't put him in the top 11 pro days that were tracked last night by the Elite 11 staff, but that's only kind of a part of their grade. The all-everything number one alpha dog quarterback of the class, Caleb Williams, only scored a 34 on his pro day. So Brock Vandegrift, who was number 3 heading into day 2 on the official Elite 11 ranking, so he was kind of in striking distance with Caleb Williams there. But, that's one of those things everybody wonders about pro day. A really quick way to explain that is the recruits get 19 throws on a variety of every type of throw they would be called on to make in the NFL or for their pro day evaluation. And you're scored 0 for a bad ball that has no chance, 1 for a ball that's on target, 2 for a ball that looks good, that was maybe dropped, and you get 3 for an absolute ripped, perfect ball throw. And, Brock ended up with a 32 for the score I've seen, and that's comparative to the 45 for the leader for Kyle McCord, who's committed to Ohio State, who comes out of the same high school which produced DeAndre Swift. So pro days are at least something. Those are taking place one more day today in Nashville, and they will name an Elite 11 MVP coming out of that event, that 3-day event. The different part about that is normally the players would have the competition for the Elite 11, and then they would go into the opening, and they would play in the 7-on-7s with the opening, and the guys would be graded as how they participated as quarterbacks inside the inside the tournament of the Elite 11 with the nation's top receivers and cornerbacks and safeties as well. You won't have that this year, so this will sort of be the end to the Elite 11 after just 3 days of kind of competition on air in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Well, Jeff, it is good to have you here on the show today. I know you've got Before the Hedges presented by Kroger coming up on Wednesday night on the DawgNation video channels, so folks will tune in to see more of your thoughts on UGA recruiting. Kind of a special appearance for you here today. We appreciate that, and if I don't speak to you again, I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend, and we'll look forward to talking to you back here again on DawgNation Daily very soon.
Okay, Brandon, but I know you're in transition mode, but I've got a special request here from the valued members of the DawgNation Forum.
By all means.
They want you to go into your chambers and consider the magical powers and the magic potion you used when you started speaking George Pickens into existence for the 2019 recruiting class at Georgia. They want you to try to trot that magic wand out again. And I want to leave you with this. You may need some time to go into your chambers and contemplate the matter, but if there's one name for the 2021 cycle you can speak into existence for the 2021 class, do you have any early thoughts on who you'd like that to be?
Yeah, I guess Corey Foreman, I guess. I mean, obviously, why not start at the top there? Mason Smith is another guy that I really like. It's in a weird way. It seems like it's almost easier to get Foreman than Smith at the moment. Maybe I'm misreading that, but it kind of seems, that way a little bit. But those are some names that would come up. I mean, obviously, I like Mondin and Williams, some of the others we talk about all the time here, there as well. But Foreman seems like one of those really interesting guys that if you could convince him to leave the state of California, you might really have something there. So maybe that's the one we'll start trying to talk into existence around here.
Wow. So that means Brandon is confident with the offensive side of the ball, and you're looking for elite pass rushers and defensive linemen for this class.
Well, we always knew this was going to be a defensive class, right? I mean, not to say that, I wouldn't have my mind on Donovan Edwards or something like that, but we always knew this was going to be a defensive-heavy class for UGA.
I think Foreman is a good name to start with right there, because a lot of the thinking and a lot of the things you hear it becomes even more likelier by the week and by the month that he comes out of the state of California when he makes his college decision, and especially if games are played this fall in the Pac-12, and you look at that schedule for USC, and I just don't see that get right year there for Clay Helton. With him going anything better than like a 9-3 with a lot of potential pitfalls on that schedule. I mean, a bounce here or there, or if the Trojans aren't on their game this year, you could look at that schedule and see them somewhere at 8-4 or even 7-4.
Yes or no question?
20.
Yes or no question to close this out. Mason Smith's not leaving the state of Louisiana, right?
That to me, I mean, he's special, Brandon. I mean, you look at him and he looks like what you'd want your junior SEC, junior sophomore All-SEC defensive tackle preseason candidate to look like. To me, if Mason Smith comes out of the state of Louisiana, that would be a bigger shock than anything that's going on in this 2021 cycle right now. And there have been several things in this cycle which caused me to scratch my head and just chalk it up to just an asterisk year in terms of college recruiting and college football recruiting.
Jeff, excellent stuff. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to reading a bunch more from you. Forum at forum.dawgnation.com, on the website at dawgnation.com. Before the Hedges presented by Kroger each and every Wednesday night, and back here again on DawgNation Daily very soon as well.
Take it easy, Brandon. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So what Jeff is referring to there is, if you want to go back to the 2019 cycle, we were talking about George Pickens all the time, well before it was, even thought of as even a possibility that he might flip from Auburn to Georgia. This is kind of after Jaden Hazelwood had made his pledge to Oklahoma. And the thought at the time around here is that Georgia's just got to have that elite wide receiver. It's just got to happen. So when Jeff would come on and ask him, hey, anything new on George Pickens? Anything this, anything that? And for a while, it all seemed to be just kind of for nothing. And then on signing day, you chip away, and it happened. I will say that it certainly felt like we spoke that into existence in the universe. So y'all let me know if we're going to do this again. Is it Foreman? Is that who you're doing it with? Is it Smile Mondin, who all of a sudden you may need a little bit more supernatural intervention than maybe you once thought? Y'all let me know about that, and we'll see if we can figure that out. Let me let you know about something for a moment. This is good news. The College Football Hall of Fame is reopening today, so guests are welcome once again. This is one of the great tourist attractions in the downtown Atlanta area. There's also just a huge connection to UGA here as well. David Pollock is just being enshrined. Champ Bailey will eventually, obviously, think about all-time greats in the Georgia program. A lot of them represented there in the College Football Hall of Fame. Go to this website, cfbhall.com, cfbhall.com. I'd love to see a lot of DawgNation Daily folks supporting the College Football Hall of Fame as they reopen here today. This is just a cool part of downtown Atlanta. I love our city's connection to college football. College Football Hall of Fame is a big part of that, and so I did not want today to end without me letting you know the College Football Hall of Fame is reopening. Now, with that said, I'm going to talk about something serious just for a moment. I know some of you don't like it when I talk about serious stuff, and I apologize. So Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports, has got this piece up right now. Here's the headline. Coronavirus in college football. Hospitalizations death projected by data analysts if FBS plays in 2020. Now, Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports gets a quote here from a guy who basically said, he said, when it comes to college football players returning to play, quote, a few of them could end up in the hospital, and you'll have a small number who could die. He says, this is quoted in CBS Sports, I don't want to sugarcoat it for you. I just want to give you the facts. If everybody comes together under normal circumstances, you will probably see that kind of outcome. Another scientist, he goes on to say, I guarantee that someone is going to die. The virus does not discriminate. Another scientist is quoted in here, essentially backing up all that kind of stuff. And I guess here's the question. And admittedly, me as just an average guy, what the scientist that Dennis Dodd quotes here seems overly dire to me. I'll just be honest enough to tell you that. However, I'm also self-aware enough to say that if it's me versus science guy, you should believe science guy because I obviously don't know what I'm talking about. However, here's the one question I don't think gets asked enough, but I think should get asked. Is this very extreme opinion that college football players are going to die for playing college football this year, some anyway, is that representative of all of science? Is that the consensus belief among all scientists, or is this just the guy that Dennis Dodd quoted and the other person that he quoted kind of backing up that point? Are these scientists that say if you play the sport, you may have a handful of college football players die? Is that what science thinks? And if it doesn't, then can we hear from some of the other people a little bit just so we have kind of a full picture of what's going on? Let me give you an example of this. And this is not coming from like some dark corner of Reddit. This is from NPR.org. The headline says, this is from June 29th, U.S. pediatricians call for in-person school this fall. Basically, this is coming from it's the nation's pediatricians, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Their guidance strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the upcoming school year should start with the goal of having students physically present in school. Now, why do I bring that up? What does that have to do with the other? I think there's this sort of thought and belief among the media that you've got to watch these college football coaches carefully because they don't care about people, they just want to play football. Or the university, the athletic departments themselves, they don't care about people, they don't care about players, they just care about money. If you want to say that about coaches and athletic directors, and frankly, I don't know why you would hurl such a negative accusation against them, but if you want to say that, that's fine. But would you also say the same thing about this group called the American Academy of Pediatrics, as quoted by NPR.org, as I said before, not exactly some dark corner of the internet here, saying that they believe that policy should begin with the idea that elementary age children need to be in school for this upcoming year? Now, I realize that elementary kids in school is very different than college kids living together, but I would also suggest it's maybe not that different. I mean, a fifth grader is like 11 years old, an incoming freshman's like 18 years old. I'm talking about a huge degree of gap in terms of age all the way around. And maybe there's a chance, I don't know what I'm talking about here, and maybe like the most negative appraisal of the situation is the accurate one. But I would be very curious to know, any of the science that pediatricians are using to say that students would be better off in school than not, is any of that science relevant to what's happening in college football? And if it is, then why aren't more of the people who are like national media people, blue check college football writers, why aren't they more interested in offering that perspective? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I will close with this one thought. I saw a quote from Arkansas coach Sam Pittman recently, who was asked about, hey, what about all these people who say that college football isn't going to be played this upcoming season? He said something very interesting. Mike Griffith retweeted this. I thought this was kind of interesting. Pittman was quoted as saying that he thinks the media is more certain there will be no football than the coaches themselves are. And I think this is true. Look at the NFL, who is planning on having training camps as per usual. College football moving forward carefully, and obviously every time someone tests positive, it's treated as a scandal, but it's still attempting to move forward. And I think that Pittman's right about this. Is that in some cases, I'm just not quite sure, what's going on with some of the national media stuff on this. Maybe Dodd is right. Maybe the guys he quotes are right. Maybe all these other stories. Paul Feinbaum, who's seemingly bringing on somebody every day, saying there's going to be no season this year. Maybe all those people are right. But it seems like that if pediatricians are pushing to get kids back in school, there might be some relevance to why there's also, a need for sports, including college football there as well. And those are some scientists I'd like to hear about. A debate or a discussion between various opinions around science, I don't think that'd be such a bad thing. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And I want to bring this to mind here for a moment on DawgNation Daily. Many of you are aware of Trayley Hale. It's kind of funny. With every recruiting cycle, there are a few parents that just kind of become well-known. I mean, parents of recruits who become Georgia signees, because I think one of the things that a lot of us really like to do is live through the experience of what it must feel like to be a parent who watches their child get a chance to go play major college football. And, I would say Chris Milton's dad, Kendall Milton's dad is kind of one of those guys. A lot of parents through the years have kind of just become well known because there's a lot of excitement around that. And just practically speaking, that convincing the parents that UGA is a good place is one of the big ways that you win with recruits. And so Trayley Hale, KELEE Ringo's mom, is someone that a lot of folks maybe not necessarily felt like they got to know personally, but she is someone that was pretty well known while KELEE Ringo was going through the process of committing to Georgia and ultimately signing with UGA. And unfortunately, over the last 24 hours, we found out kind of some bad news about her. She's going through a big battle. In fact, I think we have a tweet that kind of sums this up. Here's Trayley on Twitter. This is KELEE Ringo's mom saying, "Thank you so very much. I'm so blessed to be a part of the Dawg family. I'm thankful for all the encouragement and support. Your thoughts and prayers mean so much." She says, "I will beat this." And the thing that she's beating, and I don't know a lot about this medical stuff. I apologize if I'm going to mispronounce this or say this wrong, but I guess she's dealing with what's known as triple negative ductal carcinoma, which is a form of breast cancer. And there's a GoFundMe that's been set up for her because I guess throughout this process, many of you are aware, a flight attendant. I guess she's lost her job because she has to go through a lot of this treatment. And so the GoFundMe is sort of set up because, let's face it, battling cancer, and, certainly I have every reason to believe that she's every bit as tough a fighter as you can possibly be. I have no doubt that she's going to be, absolutely, very, very tough in fighting this, but that takes money. There's some cost associated with that. It's expensive. And if she indeed has lost her job through this, that's obviously a really tough situation. So a lot of you are already aware of this. In fact, I've kind of become more aware of this by what many of you have shared with me. So I'll share this, her GoFundMe, when I post the show today at DawgNation.com. But just in general, I wanted to make sure we mention this on the show because I wanted to send out some prayers for her. I hope that this ends well. I think it probably will. I think that she's a tough lady, a tough fighter. Obviously, KELEE Ringo is a huge, huge fan favorite as a part of the 2020 class. And, there's one thing that has been proven true over and over again. DawgNation just has a way of uniting and rallying around, whether it be any number of, causes, instances, moments over the years. This is a fan base that likes that kind of thing, that sense of unity, that sense of us all being in this together. And so one of our own needs that now. And so big support for KELEE's mom, Trayley Hale, who many of you already feel like she was a very, very prominent figure on the recruiting trail this past year. So she's dealing with an issue. We'll have prayers for her and also a link for the GoFundMe page for those who are able to support. And as we wrap up here today on DawgNation Daily, so we'll continue to follow all these recruiting stories. And Jeff was good enough to spend so much time with us here today, and we'll kind of see where a lot of this goes from here. And, I think one way or another, the more level-headed, overarching response is going to probably end up being true that, hey, there's still elite recruits out there. There's still an opportunity and a very likely path for Georgia to put together another elite class. But I do think it's difficult. I think that, when you're first coming up as a recruiting program, trying to convince guys not to go to the big name brand places like an Ohio State or an Alabama, that's hard. And then when you kind of build up your own recruiting brand, convincing guys not to go somewhere where the path to playing time might be a little easier, or the schedule that you're playing on a day in, day out basis might be a little easier, that proves to be pretty hard too. Recruiting's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, and that's why UGA has done as well with it as it has. By the way, Gatorade Updater, 1,341 days. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. We will take your comments. By the way, Facebook a little bit different now. New interface on Facebook. I'm not quite so sure I'm going to be able to get too used to this too easily, but nonetheless, that is there. We'll take a lot of your comments and remind you that if your air conditioning unit goes out, or if you're worried that it might be about to go out, my friends at R.S. Andrews can put a smile back on your face, give you the peace of mind you need to know that your air conditioning unit will make its way and keep your family cool through the summer that is still yet to come. It is just $99. You'll get your system back to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com. They'll take good care of you there on that. So let me go to Facebook first here. We'll take some comments there. Anthony Cobb says prayers for the Ringo family. No doubt about that. No doubt about that for sure. Gary Holt, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Good to see Ken Blankenship in the comment section today, hating on those Gators. You love to see that, Ken. Thank you very much. Let's see what else is going on. A little bit of Corona stuff. I can't do too much of that. Can't do too much of that. As I said before, I have no idea what the smartest opinion is. I don't know. But sometimes I wonder if I'm talking about the national sports media, has kind of only given a platform to the most dire projections possible. There's a part of that just does not quite make sense to me. But I'm not saying that it's my opinion versus smart person's opinion. I just like to hear from other smart people. Or I don't even know what to say at a certain point in time. I don't even know what to say. Pooney Walden on the subject of MJ Morris. It certainly seems like that MJ has really emerged as a very prominent quarterback target for the 2022 class. We've talked about other 2022 quarterbacks probably earlier, but MJ seems to have really come on strong as of late. John Nail says when it comes to speaking a recruit into existence, Mason Smith was the guy that came up there. Yeah, I'd love to do it. And listen, that would be truly believing in the power of mysticism if that indeed happened, because I do think that's a tough pull at the moment. Maybe we can bring that in. Maybe we can do that. Brian Whitehead says, what's your plans for the 4th? Smoking ribs and pooling. That sounds pretty good to me. I guess we'll probably be doing some version of that. Typically, we have some people in our neighborhood that set off a bunch of fireworks. We'll do the pool thing, do the grill thing, or the smoke thing. Yeah, that's pretty much what we like to do. Pretty laid back all the way around. When we were a little bit younger, we'd kind of get out and about, and I don't even know if there are any big public displays this year, but we'd go to kind of some of the public fireworks displays. I can't deal with that traffic anymore in my old age, but we'll still be out and about doing a bunch of stuff. Michael Webb says if we close like Kirby tends to, we end up top 2-3 with a number 1. Very doable. Just sign Mims, Ferguson, move. Yeah, so I think there's still some stuff that's out there for UGA. I think that's probably a pretty good perspective. John Nail says, yeah, speak a Mason Smith into existence. Let's do that. Matt Rukavina says, let's not panic. Let's trust the squirrel. Yeah, I like the idea of that. I guess Chris Milton checking in today. Good to see Mr. Milton here as a part of the program. Good to see that. Let's get a couple of YouTube comments here for a moment. Let's see what's side of things. YouTube is always very nice, very easy to open, very easy to read the comments, Facebook has a way of seemingly changing every single day and not typically changing for the better. Shane Wilkerson says, shout out for Courtney's dad today. For sure. Dennis Wilson feeling good about Miami when it comes to James Williams. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's see what else. What's going on over here? Courtney Fisher wishing for some good vibes for KELEE's mother. Absolutely. It's like y'all are arguing with Dennis and Huck Finn today. What else is going on over here? Jay Shipe says now to Facebook, LOL. I think we did start on YouTube yesterday, though. I think, did we not? David Jackson says the site is infested with trolls. It seems like there's more trolls than usual today. Seems like there's more trolls than usual. Dog57 says college football recruiting is a marathon, not a sprint. Kirby and staff will have the Dog another top 3 class this recruiting cycle. I think that's probably true. And I think that, we even said that last week, that that's probably the more likely outcome. I guess it sometimes is fair to kind of point out when, hey, you get a string of things not quite going your way. Give some credence to the folks who've noticed that. Memphis Dog says when it comes to the upcoming season, can see some games being played with no fans. Yeah, I would think that's a possibility. I could also see a scenario in which, the number of fans increases over the course of a season, which if you think about it, I mean, in a way could be good for Georgia. Can you imagine how much these Alabama fans would whine about this if it's no fans early in the season, but you slowly build your way towards fans throughout the season? So maybe Georgia plays, we've talked about this before, but at Alabama in an empty stadium. But by the time October rolls around and Auburn's coming to town, maybe they are allowing fans in games, or maybe more fans than they were allowing. Given the way the Georgia schedule sets up this year, that could actually work out pretty well. Noah Sheldon predicting Trey Blunt scoring a touchdown or two. I absolutely believe that Trey Blunt's good enough to play. I absolutely believe that. Trey's always been a player that's been very interesting to me. I think Georgia's obviously a tough lineup to crack. But Blunt, he was on the field a lot in 2017. When thrown to him, that hasn't been much, but he's proven that he can catch the football. I think that Trey Blunt is still a very interesting player. I really do. Let's see what else. What else is going on? ABC Chiropractic also bringing up what Boomer Esiason said about the fact that Esiason speculated out loud that Clemson was intentionally trying to infect its players with coronavirus. I don't think that's obviously not true, I don't believe, and I think it would be a bad idea to do that. I do. I don't think there's anything wrong with jokingly saying that, hey, get out of the way early, you may be in better shape. I don't think there's anything wrong with jokingly saying that, but obviously you wouldn't intentionally try to inflict the coronavirus, on your roster. I think that Esiason was wrong. I don't think he should be canceled for saying it, but I think that he was wrong. I mean, I think the problem that you kind of run into from a societal standpoint there as well is it's a disease that spreads fast, but sometimes it doesn't spread fast enough that it just doesn't blow through that fast. But no, you would not intentionally inflict the disease. Esiason was wrong for saying that. Chili Vic, who's an LSU fan, says, BA, if you think Scott Woodward and Ed Orgeron are going to let Mason Smith leave Louisiana, good luck. Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. But that's a player I'd love to see Georgia get. Shane Wilkerson dropping in a happy fourth, saying, remember, freedom means seeing things you don't agree with sometimes. So there you go from Shane on that front. Gwendolyn Jones says, I'm from Baton Rouge. Remember Matthew Stafford coming in here and laying the wood to my Tigers. UGA offense was good. Yeah, I think you're talking about 2008. One of the bigger victories for Georgia in that 2008 season was going to Baton Rouge, getting the win there that day. Jay Shipe says, I agree with BA with the narrative that news and social media platforms don't want. Yeah, I mean, I guess my only point here is that if you're quoting a guy who says, the worst possible outcome is a certainty, should that stand as the only opinion on the matter? I'm not talking about a random person like me, but is that the only scientist worth quoting on something like this? Because if that would be the case, then how could pediatricians be pushing for kids to be back in school? It seems hard to square those two ideas, because simultaneous what's going on with sports returning, there's also the talk. I mean, and listen, if you're like me, family with kids, things like that, the notion of is school coming back or not is just as hot of a topic as is sports coming back. It really is. So I think I keep missing this with Courtney. So is it your dad's birthday? Is that what it is, Courtney? And I'm sorry I keep missing this, but I look down, and I miss some of the comments. So if I'm missing that, I apologize. By the way, it is also late. We got to get ready to go. Jerry Dogs fan says, have any UGA players tested positive for COVID-19? Almost certainly they have. It'd be almost statistically impossible for them not to. I mean, the positive test rate nationally is about 7% right now. That's up from, a couple weeks ago it was about 5%. For a while it had gotten down to 4%, but the national positive test rate is about 7%. You're going to have some teams that have more than 7%, some teams that have less than 7%, because that's the way the statistics work. But, across the board, you should expect about 7% of all of these rosters to test positive. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. James Wade asked about Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa coach. I haven't totally followed all of that enough to make too informed of an opinion on that. I am aware of some of the stuff that he's dealt with, the strength coach, Ferentz's own son. I know what a lot of the former players, I know they've spoken out. I haven't followed the story well enough to give it a full opinion on that, I don't guess. But I am certainly aware of it. We could do a few more on Facebook here for a moment. Ray June Johnson says his son played in high school with Richard LeCount. He was an athletic freak in school. I think it's always really interesting, these guys who are good enough to play football at Georgia, thinking about all of the athletic things they were good at. A lot of you know I love to watch highlights of football players playing basketball. I'm just fascinated by them throwing it down. Every dunk seems like the rim's going to break. I think LeCount was a pretty good basketball player too, if memory serves. I just am fascinated by, if you're an athletic guy who's good enough to be on a Georgia roster and be a featured player on the Georgia roster, the kind of athleticism that you had on display in high school would make you good literally any sport you try. I am fascinated by that. Christopher Wilson says, my second wish behind beating Bama twice is to run the score up on South Carolina, their own stadium. Maybe take some grass for the road. Yeah, I don't mind that. Cody Taylor says Grimes says he's going to bring a national title to UNC. I chuckled to say the least. Yeah, it seemed like they're not very close to that, although admittedly they have gotten a little bit better here. Dan Rolander's got some tickets and some hotel rooms, so he's feeling confident about the upcoming season. David Gross says the Egg Bowl is going to get nuts. You mentioned the thing where Leach and Kiffin were together the other day, and there was some play, with I guess Leach snapped Kiffin's mask. They had the coronavirus masks on. So I've loved the Egg Bowl for a long time. I hate to sound like Ebenezer Scrooge here, but there's a part of me that likes it less if the two coaches are going to be friends. I kind of like it when the two schools are at each other's throats. I don't know that Kiffin and Leach hate each other enough for the Egg Bowl to be as good as it has been. Maybe that puts me in the minority. Ken Blankenship says the rumor is that 3 UJ players tested positive, then sent home for 2 weeks, came back, and then tested negative. Maybe that is the case, and obviously, you probably know better than me on that. I'd be surprised to know if it wasn't true. I'd be not like that specific thing, but a handful of players. I'd just be surprised to find out it wasn't true, because it's almost statistically impossible. Matt Rovina says, well, only 2 months away, will we have a normal game day? Boy, I hope so. I do. Let me do a couple other things. We've got to get ready to go because it is late. Ken Blankenship says he was asking Rodrigo how on earth the NFL teams plan to come back safely. It seems like a mess. And I guess it's certainly been kind of portrayed that way. But remember, there were, a lot of people saying that the NFL draft was going to be a mess. I know that's very different because that's true remote, that's true social distancing. But, there were plenty of naysayers for the NFL draft, and it, for the most part, went off without a hitch. There is a way to make NFL training camp, I believe, go well, but admittedly, I won't be right there in the middle of it, so that may be kind of easy for me to say. But Thus far, I think the NFL has been great on all of this. It maintained its offseason schedule. It had free agency. It had a draft. And they are steadfast with the idea they will have training camps there as well. There's not going to be a Hall of Fame game. Maybe the preseason's completely upended, and who knows what the actual games look like when they do start. But I think the NFL's done a good job with this. Moving forward and doing what it thinks is the best thing for it, giving full, I guess, credence to all available information and not just the most, dire possible prediction. David Gross says, did we ever confirm that Mullen wears hairspray? Listen, don't knock hairspray. Some of us need it. Some of us, as we get a little older, that hair gets a little more wiry, and so you got to do something to kind of keep it in bounds. So I won't hate on him for that. I won't hate on him for that at all. All right, let me do one more. We got to get ready to go. I'll go back over to YouTube for a moment. Michael Porter says, do you think this will be a good season for us? Yeah, I still feel like Georgia's got a great chance to be very involved in some good stuff. Courtney Fisher says that she thinks she's lagging a little bit on YouTube. I agree overall that I think that YouTube is just a better video platform. Now, I think Facebook is easier for people to access because a lot of people spend a lot of time on Facebook, so therefore us showing up on Facebook is just more convenient for them, which I totally understand. But if you want to compare the two video platforms, there's no doubt that YouTube is just a superior video platform. It just is. Now, I realize all these social mediums have their problems, and I won't get into some of that kind of stuff. But just in terms of the technology, there's no doubt that the YouTube platform is just better. But I still love our YouTube people. I'm sorry, our Facebook people. All right. What else is going on? Anything else? All right, I guess we got to get ready to go. All right. Big thanks to all of you for being here as part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Please do not forget that we will have a regular show tomorrow, off on Friday, and then pre-recorded show on Monday. We're actually going to pre-record that today. So we're going to get ready to do that here in just a little bit. It'll be a little shorter than normal, but typical Monday. John Stinchcomb will be on. I've actually got some interesting stuff on Georgia, Florida that I want to do as a part of Monday's show, which I think will be pretty good. So you'll see that then. And as I said before, regular broadcast tomorrow, so that should be a lot of fun all the way around. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to check out the AJC for your Atlanta news now. Stay up to date on everything going on in your world there. Always a good thing to be able to do. You're seeing more mask orders come up in Georgia. I guess Emory's calling for a mandatory mask across the state. I know that Savannah, the city of Savannah, put an ordinance in place yesterday calling for mask usage. Emory wants to see more of that, so we'll see how that goes. Also, what kind of crowds would you expect to see at some local lakes? You can follow that at ajc.com. No minor league baseball this year. Reporting on that. And as I said before, College Football Hall of Fame reopening. AJC's got some coverage for you on that. So a lot of ways to get your Atlanta news now over there at ajc.com. Check that out. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. They do a lot of stuff for you. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. That means if your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Find them online at rsandrews.com. And I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. once again for DawgNation Daily.